G'day everybody, I'm Andrew Sjoquist, I'm the founder of Fluid, and today in this special presentation for NetApp Insight, I want to talk to you about who cares about infrastructure. With all the push to the public cloud and the sensational services and offerings that are available there today, there shouldn't be lost the benefits that still exist in a properly provisioned on-prem private cloud. And Fluid does that in a matter of minutes, so I'm going to show you how. So in the agenda today, we're going to talk about the evolution of infrastructure, how we've arrived to where we're at today, what a software-defined infrastructure is and the components that make it up, what Fluid is and how Fluid can accelerate your journey to a hybrid multi-cloud environment, why Fluid and NetApp work well together from an integration into the portfolio perspective, and lastly, we're going to have a chat to one of our fantastic customers, Shane Williams from ASE, to talk about how he's used Fluid to bring the infrastructure to life in their environment. So let's get on with it. So the evolution of infrastructure as we think about it today started off with physical hardware items that were spread between on-premise locations, co-locations, and often required specialist functions to be built in hardware, which came with specialist teams and specialist certifications and skill sets. What that meant from a evolution perspective when it came time to transition to cloud was that a lot of those workloads got picked up and lifted and shifted into the cloud. In some cases, they were refactored or transformed, as we like to say, but not always. And so there's many legacy type applications that still exist, what was once on-prem, now inside of one of the public cloud providers' data centers. And so the challenge with that is that it hasn't necessarily meant that the agility is increased as was the hope, nor is the cost reduced. And so the question now is, where does this go from here? And we're seeing repatriation efforts happening, but we're also seeing people reconsider a cloud-first approach to think about a true hybrid multi-cloud and where that could lead them down their roadmap. So we know that NetApp, from a data management perspective, with the introduction of the data fabric about 6 years ago, is truly leading the way in that regard. And that's inspired Fluid to be built over the last 2.5 years to manage not only the network, but also the compute as it exists anywhere at any time. That coupled with the NetApp data fabric story provides a full stack of network, compute, and data storage managed singly from within NetApp Cloud Manager. So the transition to that software-defined everything really is the benchmark for a true hybrid multi-cloud. So by leveraging the power of Fluid, we're able to orchestrate the network, the compute, and the storage, as I've just mentioned, but we're also able to do that across any location. So we can deploy Fluid nodes in the public cloud providers, we can deploy it on-prem, and seamlessly stitch those locations together from a network perspective. We don't have to engage network teams to build complicated VPNs and complicated cross-connect services. The nodes simply find their way to each other and provide that hybrid cloud mesh, if you like, to be able to connect the components of the data fabric together. Once that's done, we have a homogeneous environment that allows us to deploy compute workloads, either attached or detached to data storage locations, leveraging the likes of Astra Trident to do so, meaning that we have an API-driven location to actually push workloads out into the real world. So Fluid was born, a software-defined, automated platform for deploying workloads anywhere, on any bare metal hardware, in any location, at any time, with literally the click of a button, all tied together and brought back for a simple presentation inside of NetApp Cloud Manager, which you're about to see shortly. What this means is that we're able to manage that hybrid environment from a SaaS-based service offering, being Cloud Manager, and really bring the simplification that exists in the public cloud back to on-prem. This in turn means that on-prem has once again become a viable and credible location to deploy workloads. Now that on-prem infrastructure may well be in a co-location or a core. It might be at an edge, like an office, or potentially even further edge, like a factory or a field or some other form of micro device. We have the capability to really accelerate that journey for application-driven infrastructures to truly exist and for hybrid cloud stories to really become true. So let's see it in action. So we look at software-defined infrastructure as code as being a homogeneous way of deploying workloads to any physical location. So you can see in this diagram that we can leverage NetApp Cloud Manager to push our workload to Azure, to AWS, but that could quite easily also be Google or anywhere where the Fluid operating system will boot. Now the process here is that Fluid boots in around about a minute. It's a completely immutable and ephemeral operating system that means that from a security perspective, we're able to identify and resolve vulnerabilities quickly and perform rolling upgrades of the infrastructure without any downtime. That same homogeneous environment can also deploy on-prem, so directly on bare metal without the need for any third-party hypervisors. But we also provide a third-party hypervisor capability, allowing for both containers for more modern applications, but also VMs for the legacy applications to run on the same infrastructure at the same time. A perfect roadmap and pathway to get from the old to the new. So diving in a little bit deeper there, what Fluid manages. The Fluid OS deploys on top of the bare metal hardware. Once that's deployed, in a matter of around about 45 seconds, Kubernetes is automatically deployed as well. Again, relatively short and hands-off approach. Doesn't require any input from engineers to configure Kubernetes. That's all done quite simply from the NetApp Cloud Manager interface. Once that's deployed, regardless of the location where that's running, we can deploy containers or VMs to that environment, again, from the NetApp Cloud Manager interface, meaning that users can really drive the value that they get from NetApp Cloud Manager by being able to now deploy workloads in compute, configure their networks, and of course, drive all the fantastic benefits that are available from the NetApp public cloud data services that are presented through the Cloud Manager interface. A really true piece of single pane of glass architecture that means that from a customer perspective, they have control once again of that true and complete hybrid cloud environment. So we know that in the cloud world, connectivity is key. And that connectivity often can be complicated to deploy. We have various locations, whether it's at the edge, in the core, in a public cloud, and we have various different technologies that need to leverage the connectivity to build clouds. It's fair to say that without connectivity, the cloud doesn't exist. In many cases, that connectivity within inside the data center and also between the data center and the public cloud has been very complex to achieve. And so from a Fluid perspective, because we can deploy on bare metal hardware, including servers, any brand of x86 or white label switches, most brands of white label switches such as NVIDIA, we can take complete control of both the network and the compute stacks and manage them from NetApp Cloud Manager. What that means is that we can have the homogeneous environment driving both the compute and the network wherever you want that to occur. And because we have it centralized back in Cloud Manager, it means that the visibility and the capability to deploy is centralized, but not only centralized, it's also adherent to Cloud Manager's audit processes from a timeline perspective, and also the authentication and workspace separation components too, making it ideal for customers who require multi-tenancy and have specialist security requirements within that regard. So when we ask the question, why Fluid, we talk about a variety of different benefits. So if we think about the multiple different compute environments that exist, and we know today that compute is a commodity item, and you can get it from Azure, AWS, Google, you can deploy it on-prem, you can take it in the data center, or from specialist bare metal providers like Equinix Metal. But the challenge there is, what next? And that's where Fluid steps in. Fluid deploys onto those environments to turn them into that homogeneous platform that's capable of scaling globally. So no longer do we need to think about necessarily regions or locations. We can think about infrastructure at a more global scale, but again, managed and consolidated from within inside Cloud Manager. The immutable and ephemeral operating system allows that turn up to happen very, very quickly, literally in a minute. And because it's immutable and ephemeral, from a security perspective, all we need to do to patch those environments is to reboot them. And that can happen in a high availability cluster as a rolling restart without the need for any downtime to occur to the actual application workload. So there's plenty of benefits from a Fluid perspective, and certainly for NetApp customers who leverage Fluid, the consolidation into Cloud Manager means that there's more and more value to be achieved from that Cloud Manager interface. So let's dive into that a little bit more. What does Fluid and NetApp portfolios look like together? I've talked about the integration between NetApp Cloud Manager and Fluid, and this today exists in the portal. If you go to cloudmanager.netapp.com/Fluid, you'll have access to be able to deploy your very first Fluid workload. The native integration between Fluid and Cloud Manager that exists here is currently the only and the first third-party integration that is deployed inside that Cloud Manager environment. We adhere to the security standards that Cloud Manager have provided, but we provide that visibility to be able to see and manage those Fluid nodes deployed anywhere in the world. In a broader context, when we think about Fluid with the NetApp portfolio, starting from Cloud Manager at the top, we work down into various elements, and you can see the connectivity components that underpin the NetApp data fabric are provided by Fluid. So all the networking prerequisites that need to be handled in order for a NetApp data fabric to become true and real and hybrid is provided by Fluid. So now, whilst a lot of customers are public cloud first, we still have the backwards compatibility or the backwards reachability from a network perspective to be able to see our on-premise infrastructure and transmit both control plane and data plane traffic between those locations. Diving a little bit deeper, because we can run compute workloads as either VMs or containers anywhere where Fluid will boot, provides a perfect private cloud capability anywhere where the customer would like that to be deployed. So to dive a little bit deeper into the NetApp Astra Data Store, that product is relatively new, but has huge capability and benefits. What NetApp Astra Data Store provides is the ability for anyone's x86 hardware with hard drives installed in it to effectively become a mini NetApp filer of some description. That's huge capability because it allows us to leverage those third-party compute architectures and really run compute, network, and storage all on the same infrastructure at the same time, which to this audience, I don't have to explain the huge benefit that brings to operational environments and operational teams, and also from a security context, the lowering of the security exposure points really drives a tighter security posture at the edge. I mentioned briefly that we're running Equinix Metal, or we have the capability to run Fluid on Equinix Metal, I should say. And what that means is that from within the NetApp Cloud Manager interface, we're able to click a button and have clusters of any size and any scale deployed on Equinix Metal infrastructures anywhere in the world. So that's a huge capability to be able to effectively bring another cloud provider who's providing bare metal at a competitive price in competitive markets and an additional range of markets to where the other providers are providing their services, but again, have the homogeneous management capabilities all tied up and presented within NetApp Cloud Manager. So that's enough from me. Now it's time to hear from one of our fantastic customers, introducing Shane from ASE. Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm a data center operations manager for ASE. I ensure that new deployments along with existing infrastructure maintenance upgrades roll out as smooth as possible. What we do here is we are a service provider that offer multi-different type of workloads and offerings, and as well as individual storage deployments. So whether it's container workloads, virtualized storage, virtual machines, we are able to assist in any of those areas.
That's great, Shane. So why don't you give us a bit of a background about what the trigger was for you selecting Fluid and what the challenges that you found that it solved for you from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, sure. What I found was we could see that containerization workloads were a thing that was upcoming, right? There was a trend that was forming there, and we could see the benefits of being able to start to, I guess, adopt some of those type of deployments for us instead of just the usual virtual machines. So we needed to look at something that was going to bring, I guess, both existing infrastructure being the current virtual machine workloads, as long as with bringing along new containered workloads and running them, I guess, effectively side by side.
That's fantastic. So you're able to basically take advantage of the new containerized applications, but also support your legacy workloads.
Yeah, correct. In a perfect side by side fashion.
And what has that meant for you from a day-to-day maintenance perspective, but also the rollout of new infrastructure?
Well, I guess the first thing is that we can just effectively focus on one single cluster or environment, if you want to call it like that, and we can just obviously, carry out any type of upgrades we need to, and it will cover both types of workloads that we have running there. It's not like we don't need siloed teams to take care of two different environments. There's less overhead workload to do that for ongoing maintenance, as well as new deployments.
So has that basically accelerated your new deployment time? And if so, by how much?
Look, it's definitely streamlined it. With the new rollouts, it's I would say in half the time of what we used to do it. And the beauty of the fluid environment, once you've got that running, doing new container workloads or virtual machine workloads, there's not like we need to reach out to a network team or a storage team to go and provision things for us, because Fluid in itself flows out to the network and the storage to be able to create that single provisioning task workflow.
Well, you touched on a really good point there about the storage, because we know that ASC has been a long time customer of NetApp's. How has the integration that Fluid brings with ONTAP via Astra Trident um, helped your storage provisioning times as well?
Look, it's lowered them a hell of a lot. And the good thing is that, whether you've got like someone from the DevOps team or you've got just a normal system admin person, they can, no need to bother anyone else, and they can run through and deploy what they need then and there. There's no need to bring in other parties. Do we have available, like other IP addresses that we need to use? There's none of that, because it's already maintained and set, and the standards are there within Fluid to make all that happen.
Oh, that's great. And from the point of view of the integration with NetApp Cloud Manager, are you finding that a whole different level of skill sets within the organization are using Cloud Manager to provide level one support right through to level three engineering?
Yeah, definitely. It's a very streamlined user interface. Anyone can use it. It's very easy to go through the different I guess steps to get what you want done. And there's no excess worrying about different variables, value settings. There's nothing like that. It's just what you need. There's nothing else. So there's pretty much a way of being able to do things without going and questioning someone else that might be highly skilled to know about that knowledge. It's very straightforward, single pane of glass.
That's fantastic. And from the point of view of security, the immutable and ephemeral operating system that Fluid rolls out to the hardware, how have you found that's affected your security profile?
Well, I guess first thing is that there's no way to worry about, if you're going to be implementing or you need to do like a package install of something. it's not like you can do it, because you can't actually implement that and break something. There's no need to worry about that. So these like images that are already prepared by Fluid team, they're already being scanned and run through all the correct channels to make sure that the security is completely enforced within that operating system that's running on that bare metal node. So that's one thing that we don't have to worry about, which is great. If there is somehow someone that is, unauthorized to gain access to that level of the operating system, they can't really do any damage on it. Make changes, reset it, it's going to be back to where it was initially. There's no way, because being immutable, it's there's less impact to what we've got running there.
Yeah, that's great. And so we know that the whole Fluid cluster can be upgraded just with a rolling reboot. How much time has that saved you in your maintenance operations without having to patch hypervisors or underlying operating systems, just rolling that reboot?
Yeah, it's massive. It's definitely it's brought down the way that we need to go through, and back in the days we'd have to go through and read all the release notes, making sure that everything is aligned correctly with the new rollout. There's nothing like that individually that can be modified or needed to be done, and so being with that, we don't have to go through those extra steps. It's effectively, once you've got that image there available, and that that's the version that you want to roll out in the cluster. It's a couple of check boxes and reboot, and bang, it comes up and running again with the latest version.
Oh, excellent. And in terms of, you mentioned before the ability for yourself and your DevOps colleagues to deploy their own workloads without bringing in sort of third-party network teams. What has that meant for you in terms of speed to deployment, but also capability to deploy your own load balancing and those type of things?
Yeah, look, it's definitely helped a lot. We had, before Fluid came on board, uh, it was funny, I'm not a part of the networking team, but I had to actually get on the tools at some stage to get one of our co-locations rolled out, because the network team on our side was swamped with other tasks that were at hand, and deadlines were creeping for the rollout of the new infrastructure, and I had to even get involved, which shouldn't have really been the case. But with Fluid, it's a way where it's once you make those initial connections to the networking stack, from there it's zero touch. From there, you don't need to request any things like destination NATs, any type of ports that are required opening. Fluid does it all from within the box itself. We also found that the initial deployment times were cut down dramatically. It's funny, because the service delivery team, that when they have you have the actual information to roll out for a new deployment for a customer, let's say, they come to me and they go, well, who do we need to get into this meeting, to get this happening? And I'm like, we don't really need a team to do it. We just need one person. And they're scratching their head going, but don't we need to bring in the network team? No, nothing like that. So it's all from that one single user for deploying it. They can do everything from there. That's the storage, that's the network. With the load balancers is great. The good thing with that is, and one of my favorite features is that you can have a public IP, or whether it's an internal private IP address, and you can actually do individual port sharing across that same IP address. So if you have an expensive, IPv4 public IP, you can repurpose that for different services that have multiple different port numbers. So it's a great way of doing things. less burning of IP addresses, that's for sure.
That's great. And speaking of multitasking, Shane, I understand that you used to get your hands dirty a little bit with the service provider licensing on former solutions. Tell us about how Fluid simplified the licensing perspective for you.
Yeah, good that you touched on that. It was something that I kind of wanted to forget about actually, but yeah, now that you brought it up, with that, we found with a past vendor, we had some issues always with the chargeback license billing to us. So being a service provider, we had a lot of virtual machine workloads. There was, the end of month billing that we would see coming in at times wouldn't meet up and I guess match with the expectations of what's going to happen. And discussions with, the middleman distributors, asking, questioning, how do these calculations work against, the charges that we're being faced with. Even they were struggling to determine, the numbers on how that was all calculated. It was very quite involved. It was like you needed, I guess, a dedicated person or a small team to effectively make sure that what you're getting billed is correctly of what you've got running under the hood in your infrastructure. So yeah, it was very time consuming. A lot of scratching your head incidences occurring, is for sure. But with Fluid, it's really good. It's just easy. It's one single node license rollout. There's no kind of gotchas on, if you're running X amount of RAM, it's going to cost you this kind of dollar figure. Nothing like that. So single node licensing, great.
That's great, Shane. It sounds like you've really taken advantage of the Fluid features. So, on that note, what would you say to people who are thinking about maybe undertaking a Fluid POC out there?
Yeah, definitely. I'd recommend it entirely. Give it a try. There's nothing like that you need any kind of strange hardware to run it. Very thin, actually. You can get up and running, in a short matter of time. And yeah, I'd strongly recommend it. There's really, we haven't come across anything out there that runs side by side workloads. So it's great for looking at your I guess your roadmap on if you're going to effectively go to a full containerized approach, but you do have those legacy VMs hanging around. It's not like you have to worry about, you needing completely separate siloed pieces of hardware to run all that. So yeah, definitely give it a go. It seems to be the way we take it on board is that Fluid seems to be able to flow in any environment.
Very good and a lovely pun to wrap it up there too. So, Shane, thank you for being a great customer, and we're looking forward to chatting to you again. And please keep your feature requests and suggestions coming. You've been instrumental in that regard. So we appreciate your time and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.